power doesn't reveal character nearly as fast as the moment someone believes you have none. The polished marble floor of Ellington Federal Bank reflected the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, casting long ribbons of light across a lobby that smelled faintly of fresh coffee, polished wood, and expensive leather. It was just after 9 o'clock on a cool Monday morning in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, and the building hummed with the quiet confidence of people handling mortgages, retirement accounts, and million-dollar investments before lunch. Customers stood patiently in neat lines, financial advisors welcomed long-time clients with practiced smiles, and security officers watched the entrance with calm professionalism. Among the steady stream of visitors walked a tall black man wearing a charcoal gray sport coat, dark jeans, and polished brown shoes that had clearly seen years of careful use. His silver watch was understated, his briefcase worn at the edges, and his expression carried the relaxed confidence of someone who never needed expensive labels to prove his worth. Marcus Ellington paused for a moment near the entrance, letting his eyes travel slowly across the lobby without drawing attention to himself. Every greeting between employees, every smile offered to customers, every delayed response at the teller windows became another silent note inside his remarkable memory. For years, Marcus had followed one simple principle. If a leader only experienced the business through executive boardrooms and polished presentations, he would never truly understand what happened on the front lines. That was why he often visited branches without announcing himself, arriving alone, refusing security escorts, and blending into the morning crowd like any ordinary customer. Few employees outside corporate headquarters had ever seen the CEO in person, and Marcus preferred it that way. Truth was easier to find when nobody knew who was watching. Across the lobby, a young banker helped an elderly woman organize paperwork for a retirement account, patiently explaining every signature without rushing her. Marcus smiled quietly. Moments like that reminded him why he had spent nearly 30 years building Ellington Federal Bank from a struggling regional institution into one of the fastest-growing community banks in the Southeast. It had never been only about numbers. It had always been about dignity. He believed every customer deserved to feel respected the moment they walked through those glass doors, regardless of their appearance, income, or background. But not every person inside the building shared that belief. Near the entrance, whispers began drifting between two customers who glanced repeatedly toward Marcus before looking away. One quietly reached for a cell phone. Another frowned as Marcus stopped near the investment desk to observe a conversation unfolding nearby. Within seconds, uncertainty spread through the lobby like an invisible current. Nobody accused him of stealing. Nobody claimed he had threatened anyone. Nobody reported seeing a crime. Yet somewhere between assumptions and fear, a single sentence was quietly spoken into a 911 call. "There's a suspicious black man inside the bank." Less than 4 minutes later, the calm rhythm of the morning changed. The front doors swung open with sudden urgency as Officer Daniel Brooks stepped inside, his polished badge catching the overhead lights while conversations around the lobby faded into uneasy silence. Marcus slowly turned toward the approaching footsteps, unaware that the next few minutes would test not only one officer's judgment but the values of an entire institution, and before this morning was over, one phone call would force everyone inside that magnificent building to discover who truly held the power. Officer Daniel Brooks did not rush because he believed he needed to. He walked with the measured confidence of someone convinced that the badge on his chest had already answered every question before he asked it. The polished heels of his boots echoed across the marble floor, drawing nervous glances from customers who quietly stepped aside to clear his path. Conversations faded into whispers. A mother gently guided her young son closer to her side. An elderly gentleman folded his newspaper and watched in silence. Marcus Ellington remained exactly where he was, one hand resting lightly on the handle of his weathered briefcase while his calm eyes followed the officer's approach without the slightest sign of alarm. Years of leading thousands of employees had taught him that the loudest person in the room was rarely the one holding the greatest authority. Officer Brooks stopped only a few feet away and looked Marcus up and down before speaking. "Sir, I need you to tell me why you are standing here." His tone sounded less like a question than a conclusion waiting for confirmation. Marcus offered a polite smile. Good morning, officer. I am visiting the branch. Brooks narrowed his eyes. Visiting for what? Marcus answered with the same steady voice. Personal business. The officer glanced toward several customers who immediately looked away, unwilling to become involved. A young teller behind the counter seemed ready to say something before her supervisor quietly touched her arm, silently encouraging restraint. Marcus noticed the exchange but said nothing. Instead, he observed every reaction the way he always did during his unannounced visits. Small moments often revealed the true culture of an organization far better than polished quarterly reports ever could. Brooks took another step closer. Do you have an account here? Marcus nodded. Yes, I do. Can you prove it? Marcus reached slowly toward the inside pocket of his sport coat. Before his hand even reached the fabric, Brooks raised one hand sharply. Do not reach until I tell you to. Marcus immediately stopped moving. That is completely understandable, he replied calmly. I was simply reaching for my wallet because you asked. The officer did not acknowledge the explanation. Instead, his attention shifted toward the expensive watches displayed behind reinforced glass, then back to Marcus's worn briefcase. Something in his expression suggested that he had already built a story inside his own mind, one supported more by assumptions than evidence. Nearby, a financial advisor quietly excused herself from a client meeting and disappeared through a side hallway. Upstairs, inside the executive offices, a discreet notification appeared on the branch manager's phone. The internal security system had automatically flagged unusual activity near the lobby entrance after employees manually activated a customer concern alert. Within seconds, security cameras throughout the building quietly focused on the interaction. None of the people standing in the lobby realized that every movement, every word, and every decision was now being preserved with perfect clarity. Marcus understood exactly how the system worked because he had personally approved the investment that modernized it 2 years earlier. Even so, he made no effort to mention it. Truth rarely needed an introduction. Brooks folded his arms. Someone reported that you have been making people uncomfortable. Marcus looked around the lobby, meeting the uncertain eyes of strangers who quickly looked toward the floor. He answered softly, Feeling uncomfortable and witnessing wrongdoing are not always the same thing. The words hung in the air longer than anyone expected. For the briefest moment, the entire bank seemed to stop breathing, while somewhere deep inside the building, a phone began ringing in an executive office that would soon change the direction of everyone's morning. The ringing telephone inside the executive office continued unanswered for several seconds before branch manager Susan Whitaker stepped away from a meeting with 2 commercial lending clients. She glanced at the internal security notification flashing across her screen and immediately recognized the location displayed on the map. The main lobby. Her expression shifted almost instantly. She apologized to the clients and walked briskly toward the hallway overlooking the banking floor. From the second-story glass railing she could clearly see Officer Daniel Brooks standing only a few feet from Marcus Ellington, although from that distance she could not hear the conversation. The moment she recognized Marcus, her heart skipped. She knew exactly why he had arrived without notice. This was not unusual for him. Every few weeks he quietly visited one of the bank's 43 branches, refusing special treatment, and insisting that employees interact with him exactly as they would with any customer. Only senior executives and branch managers were informed of the possibility, and even they never knew the date or time. Marcus believed that respect could never be measured during rehearsed inspections. It had to be discovered naturally, when nobody believed they were being evaluated. Downstairs, the atmosphere grew heavier with every passing second. Customers shifted uncomfortably, pretending to examine brochures while secretly watching every movement. A teenage intern organizing financial pamphlets looked toward the security desk, clearly unsure whether someone should intervene. The uniformed bank security officer remained near the entrance, uncertain how to respond while a local police officer was already leading the encounter. Marcus noticed the hesitation spreading through the room. Fear had a remarkable way of convincing good people that silence was the safest choice. He had witnessed it before in boardrooms, in community meetings, and sometimes even inside his own organization. That realization saddened him far more than the uncomfortable attention directed toward himself. Officer Brooks continued studying Marcus with visible suspicion. "You still have not explained why you have been standing here watching people," he said. Marcus answered calmly. "I have been observing customer service." Brooks gave a short laugh that carried more disbelief than humor. "Observing customer service?" Marcus nodded. "That is correct." The officer glanced toward several employees. "Do any of you know this man?" Silence answered him. Susan Whitaker had already begun moving toward the stairs, but before she reached them another executive quietly stopped her. "Wait," he whispered carefully. "Let us see how everyone responds." She understood exactly what he meant. Marcus had often reminded his leadership team that integrity revealed itself during uncomfortable moments, not convenient ones. If someone interrupted too quickly, they might never discover where the real weaknesses existed. Back in the lobby, Brooks folded a small notebook and slipped it into his pocket. His voice grew firmer. "People like you always have an explanation ready." Marcus did not react to the implication. Instead, he looked directly into the officer's eyes with the same composed expression that had reassured anxious investors during economic downturns and comforted employees through difficult years. "Officer," he said quietly, "every decision you make today will be remembered longer than you think." Brooks interpreted the words as confidence bordering on arrogance. He did not realize Marcus meant something entirely different. High above them, discreet cameras continued recording every angle of the conversation. Behind reinforced walls, digital archives quietly stored each second with precise timestamps. Outside, another black sedan rolled slowly into the visitor parking lot, and a distinguished gray-haired man stepped out while speaking into his phone. Very few people inside the bank recognized him yet, but within minutes his arrival would transform a tense misunderstanding into a moment that nobody present would ever forget. The distinguished man outside closed the door of his sedan with measured calm, adjusted the cuffs of his navy suit, and continued speaking quietly into his phone as he walked toward the entrance. His pace never changed because he had no reason to believe anything unusual was happening inside. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the lobby grew increasingly strained. Officer Daniel Brooks interpreted Marcus Ellington's composure as defiance rather than confidence, and that misunderstanding shaped every decision that followed. "I asked you simple questions," Brooks said firmly. "Instead of giving direct answers, you keep talking in circles." Marcus remained respectful. "I have answered every question truthfully, officer." Brooks shook his head. "Not in a way that helps me understand why you are here." Marcus glanced briefly toward the teller stations where several employees watched with visible concern before returning his attention to the officer. "Sometimes understanding begins by asking the right question." The response only deepened Brooks's frustration. Around them, customers exchanged uncertain looks. Some quietly unlocked their phones, pretending to check messages while discreetly recording the encounter. Others simply stood frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing an ordinary misunderstanding or something far more serious. Upstairs, Susan Whitaker finally reached the staircase, but another senior executive quietly reminded her of Marcus's standing instruction during unannounced visits. "Observe first. Intervene only when absolutely necessary." She stopped halfway down the stairs, every instinct urging her to step forward, yet she also knew Marcus believed leadership could only improve by confronting uncomfortable truths instead of hiding them. Brooks extended one arm, signaling Marcus to remain exactly where he was. "Do not move." Marcus complied immediately, placing both hands where they could easily be seen. His voice remained even. "I have no intention of leaving." Brooks took another careful step closer. "Then place your briefcase on the floor." Without hesitation, Marcus slowly lowered the worn leather case onto the polished marble beside his shoes. Several customers watched the simple movement with growing unease, sensing that the situation had become far more serious than anyone expected only minutes earlier. A little girl standing beside her grandmother looked up and whispered, "Grandma, did he do something wrong?" The older woman hesitated before quietly answering, Sometimes people decide that before they know the facts. Marcus heard the words, and although he never turned toward them, they settled heavily in his thoughts. He had spent decades encouraging young people to believe fairness was more than an ideal. Now, inside the very institution he had built upon that principle, a child was witnessing how quickly appearances could influence judgment. Brooks requested identification once again. Marcus answered politely. "My wallet is inside my jacket. If you would like me to retrieve it, I will do so slowly." Instead of responding immediately, Brooks studied him in silence, as though weighing suspicion against procedure. Every passing second increased the tension throughout the lobby. Even the soft instrumental music drifting through the ceiling speakers seemed strangely distant. Then the front entrance opened once more. The gray-haired visitor stepped inside, paused after taking in the unusual scene, and immediately recognized Marcus standing near the center of the lobby. His expression changed from casual curiosity to unmistakable concern. Without raising his voice, he slipped his phone back into his pocket and walked purposefully toward the group. Several employees recognized the newcomer at once. It was Charles Bennett, chairman of the board of Ellington Federal Bank. Before he spoke a single word, more than one employee instinctively straightened their posture, sensing that the ordinary Monday morning they had expected was about to become a defining moment that would be remembered throughout the entire organization for years to come. Charles Bennett slowed to a stop several feet away, carefully studying the scene before saying anything. Decades in banking had taught him that the first person to speak rarely understood everything that had happened. His eyes moved from Officer Daniel Brooks to Marcus Ellington, then toward the silent employees lining the lobby. He noticed the uneasy expressions, the discreetly raised cell phones, and the uncomfortable stillness that had settled over the building. Marcus met Bennett's eyes for only a brief moment before giving the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. Bennett understood the message immediately. Not yet. Let the moment unfold. Let everyone reveal who they truly are. Without another word, he stepped quietly to one side of the lobby, remaining within view but making no attempt to interrupt. Upstairs, Susan Whitaker saw the exchange and realized the chairman had reached exactly the same conclusion. This inspection had become something much larger than a routine branch visit. It had become a measure of character. Officer Brooks noticed the distinguished older gentleman, but assumed he was simply another customer waiting to conduct business. His attention returned entirely to Marcus. "I have asked for identification several times," he said. "If you have nothing to hide, this should be very simple." Marcus answered with the same calm tone that had never wavered since the encounter began. "I have already told you where my wallet is. I am willing to retrieve it exactly as you instruct." Brooks hesitated for a second before replying. "Very slowly." Marcus nodded once. Every movement that followed was deliberate. He announced each action before making it, carefully reaching inside his jacket while keeping his other hand visible. The quiet clicking of several phone cameras echoed faintly across the marble floor. A young college student waiting to open his first checking account lowered his voice and whispered to the customer beside him. "He is doing everything the officer asked." The other customer answered just as softly. "I know." Marcus removed a slim leather wallet and held it where Brooks could clearly see it without taking another step. Inside were several cards, neatly arranged, along with a simple driver's license bearing his full legal name. Before Brooks reached for it, Marcus spoke again. "Officer, before this continues any further, I would like you to remember something." Brooks frowned. "What is that?" Marcus looked around the lobby, meeting the eyes of employees, customers, and strangers alike. "Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with the same respect you would hope your own family receives." For the first time since entering the bank, complete silence filled the room. Even Brooks seemed briefly uncertain how to respond. The words carried no accusation, no anger, and no threat. They sounded more like a principle than a defense. Yet instead of reflecting on them, Brooks interpreted the statement as another attempt to lecture him. He accepted the identification, glanced at the name printed on the license, and paused only long enough to confirm that it matched the man standing before him. The name meant nothing to him. He had never met the chief executive of Ellington Federal Bank, and he made no effort to ask whether anyone inside recognized it. That single assumption quietly closed the door on the easiest opportunity to end the misunderstanding. Behind the customer service desk, one employee discreetly pressed another internal alert, automatically preserving additional security footage from every lobby camera and synchronizing it with the building audio system. No announcement was made. No alarms sounded. The technology simply continued documenting every word with perfect precision. Charles Bennett watched the process unfold without moving an inch. He knew something Officer Brooks did not. The truth had already been captured from every possible angle, and before this day was over, facts rather than assumptions would decide how this story ended. Marcus waited patiently while Officer Daniel Brooks examined the driver's license, as though the small plastic card alone could explain the man standing before him. Brooks read the name once, then again, but it carried no meaning because he had never expected someone of Marcus Ellington's position to arrive without an entourage, without an expensive luxury vehicle, and without announcing his presence. The assumptions that had guided his judgment moments earlier continued to shape every conclusion he reached now. Around the lobby, the silence had become almost tangible. Customers no longer pretended to focus on their banking. Employees stood perfectly still behind polished counters, exchanging cautious glances that revealed growing concern. Marcus noticed each expression with remarkable clarity. Leadership, he often reminded his executive team, was never tested when everything went according to plan. It was tested when ordinary people faced uncomfortable choices between remaining silent and doing what was right. He could almost see those choices unfolding in real time across the room. Officer Brooks handed the identification back without offering any acknowledgement beyond a brief nod. "You still have not given me a reason to believe you belong here," he said. Marcus accepted the wallet calmly and placed it back inside his jacket. "I am a customer," he replied. "And I am here for business." Brooks folded his arms once again. "That is not specific enough." Marcus allowed a quiet breath before answering. "Sometimes privacy is also part of legitimate business." The response was respectful, but it did not satisfy the officer. Behind the customer service desk, one senior banker finally gathered enough courage to step forward. "Officer," she began carefully, "perhaps we can verify his information through our customer records." Before she could continue, Brooks lifted one hand. "I will handle this." She stopped immediately, her voice disappearing beneath the weight of authority. Marcus looked toward her with quiet appreciation. She had tried. Sometimes that mattered even when the attempt did not succeed. Nearby, Charles Bennett remained silent, watching every decision with thoughtful eyes. He recognized something that many others in the lobby had not yet understood. This moment was no longer simply about Marcus. It had become a lesson for every employee witnessing the encounter. How people responded to uncertainty often revealed the culture of an institution more honestly than any corporate mission statement ever could. At that exact moment, the discreet vibration of Marcus's phone broke the stillness inside his jacket pocket. He glanced toward Officer Brooks before speaking. "Officer, my phone is ringing. May I answer it?" Brooks considered the request for a moment before giving a short reply. "Put it on speaker." Marcus slowly removed the phone, careful to announce every movement exactly as he had done throughout the encounter. The screen displayed a familiar name: Chief Harold Reynolds. Marcus looked briefly at the incoming call before pressing decline. Several people nearby exchanged puzzled looks. Even Charles Bennett raised an eyebrow. Brooks noticed the name but assumed nothing of it. "You ignored the call," he said. Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Yes." "Why?" Marcus answered with complete honesty. "Because I would rather resolve this conversation with respect before involving anyone else." Those words settled over the lobby with unexpected weight. No accusation. No complaint. No attempt to embarrass anyone. Simply a sincere effort to end the misunderstanding peacefully. For a brief instant, uncertainty crossed Brooks's face. It was the first small crack in the confidence that had guided every decision since he entered the bank. Yet before he could respond, the phone rang again. This time the sound echoed clearly through the silent lobby, and every eye instinctively turned toward Marcus as he looked at the illuminated screen once more, knowing that the next decision he made would change not only the rest of the morning but the future of everyone standing within those marble walls. The phone continued to ring, its clear tone cutting through the silence like a clock announcing that time for assumptions was running out. Marcus Ellington looked at the screen for one more second before lifting his eyes toward Officer Daniel Brooks. "Officer," he said quietly, "with your permission, I would like to answer this call." Brooks hesitated. The confidence that had guided him since entering the bank had begun to compete with an unfamiliar feeling that something about this situation was no longer adding up. After a brief pause, he nodded once. "Keep it on speaker." Marcus answered immediately. "Good morning, Chief Reynolds." The voice that filled the lobby carried calm authority. "Marcus, I have been trying to reach you. Charles Bennett just informed me there may be an issue at the downtown branch. Are you all right?" Several customers exchanged puzzled looks. Officer Brooks stiffened almost imperceptibly when he recognized the voice of his own chief of police. Marcus replied with complete composure. "I am fine, Chief. I believe there has been a misunderstanding." Chief Reynolds answered without hesitation. "Stay exactly where you are. I am only a few minutes away." The call ended as quietly as it had begun, but the atmosphere inside the bank had changed completely. Brooks stared at Marcus for a long moment, searching his face for an explanation that no longer fit the conclusions he had formed earlier. Before he could speak, Charles Bennett finally stepped forward. His polished shoes echoed softly across the marble floor until he stood beside Marcus. Without looking at the officer, Bennett extended his hand toward Marcus with genuine respect. "Good morning, Marcus. I apologize for arriving a little later than expected." Marcus returned the handshake with a warm smile. "Good morning, Charles. Thank you for coming." Every employee who recognized the chairman instinctively straightened their posture. The lobby grew so quiet that even the faint hum of the air conditioning seemed unusually loud. Bennett slowly turned toward Officer Brooks. His voice remained courteous, measured, and entirely free of anger. "Officer, I believe introductions are now appropriate." Brooks looked from Bennett to Marcus, still trying to understand the unexpected familiarity between the two men. Bennett continued. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Marcus Ellington, Chief Executive Officer of Ellington Federal Bank." The words settled over the room with extraordinary weight. Several customers looked toward Marcus in disbelief. The young intern near the brochure display quietly covered his mouth. Susan Whitaker closed her eyes for the briefest moment, grateful that the truth had finally surfaced. Brooks remained motionless. He looked once more at the driver's license still fresh in his memory, realizing that the name he had dismissed only moments earlier belonged to the man whose decisions shaped every branch, every employee, and every customer experience inside the institution surrounding him. Marcus offered neither satisfaction nor triumph. His expression remained exactly as calm as it had been from the beginning. "Titles matter far less than how we treat people before we know those titles," he said gently. No one answered because there was nothing left to argue. Every security camera continued recording. Every customer holding a phone continued documenting the moment. Every employee understood they had just witnessed something far more important than the identity of the man standing in the center of the lobby. They had witnessed how easily assumptions could replace facts, and how quietly dignity could expose them. Outside the bank, another police vehicle turned into the entrance, and moments later Chief Harold Reynolds stepped out, already aware that the next conversation would determine not merely what had happened that morning, but what accountability would look like once the complete truth stood in full view. Chief Harold Reynolds entered the lobby with steady purpose, his presence commanding attention without a single raised voice. The conversations that had quietly resumed moments earlier disappeared again as employees, customers, and even Officer Daniel Brooks turned toward the entrance. "Reynolds," acknowledged Charles Bennett with a respectful nod before walking directly to Marcus Ellington. Without hesitation, he extended his hand. "Marcus, I am sorry this happened inside your bank." Marcus accepted the handshake warmly. "Thank you for coming, Chief. I appreciate you responding so quickly." The exchange lasted only a few seconds, yet it changed the atmosphere more than any announcement could have. Brooks had worked under Chief Reynolds for nearly 12 years. He had seen the chief greet elected officials, judges, and business leaders, but never with the unmistakable respect now being shown to the man he had questioned only minutes before. Reynolds finally turned toward Brooks. His expression remained calm, professional, and measured. "Officer Brooks, I need you to step over here with me." Brooks complied immediately. Reynolds lowered his voice enough to preserve everyone's dignity while still allowing nearby witnesses to understand the seriousness of the conversation. "I am not making conclusions here in the lobby," he said. "That is not how accountability works. But I have already been informed that every camera in this building recorded the entire interaction, and several witnesses have preserved additional video from their phones. We will review every second before reaching any determination." Brooks nodded quietly. For the first time that morning, certainty had disappeared from his face. Reynolds continued. "Until that review is complete, another supervisor will finish this response." There was no accusation in his words, only procedure. Marcus listened without interruption. He had spent enough years leading large organizations to understand that fair systems depended on facts rather than emotion. Charles Bennett stepped forward and addressed the customers gathered throughout the lobby. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience today. Our bank believes every individual deserves professionalism, fairness, and respect. We will cooperate fully with the police department's review, and we also will conduct our own internal evaluation of today's events." Several customers nodded quietly. One elderly woman who had watched the entire encounter from the beginning smiled gently at Marcus. "Thank you for staying calm," she said. "You reminded all of us what dignity looks like." Marcus returned the smile. "Kindness is easiest when life is easy. Character is measured when it is not." Those words spread through the lobby almost as quickly as the videos that had already begun reaching family members and friends through text messages. Employees who had remained silent earlier now reflected on the choices they had made. Some wished they had spoken sooner. Others silently promised themselves they would never again allow uncertainty to outweigh compassion. Upstairs, the security department confirmed that every camera angle, every timestamp, and every audio recording had been securely archived. Nothing would depend on memory alone. Facts had been preserved with remarkable clarity. As Officer Brooks quietly walked with another supervising officer toward a private conference room, he glanced once more across the lobby. Marcus was not celebrating. He was not criticizing anyone. Instead, he had already begun speaking with frightened customers, thanking employees for their professionalism, and reassuring everyone that the bank would remain open for business. Watching that quiet leadership left an impression more powerful than any public argument ever could. Reynolds observed the same scene before speaking softly to Charles Bennett. "Sometimes the strongest evidence is not found in a report. Sometimes it is found in the way people carry themselves when they have every reason not to." Bennett nodded in complete agreement, knowing that by the end of the day the official investigations would begin. But the most important lesson had already unfolded before dozens of witnesses, proving that genuine authority never needed to humiliate others in order to be recognized. 3 weeks later, the marble lobby of Ellington Federal Bank looked exactly as it had before that unforgettable Monday morning, yet everyone who walked through its glass doors sensed that something important had changed. New employees had completed expanded customer service training. Managers now gathered every Friday to discuss not only financial performance but also moments where compassion had shaped better decisions. The security team had introduced additional procedures emphasizing communication before assumption, and every branch across the organization adopted the same standards. Marcus Ellington insisted that no one use the incident to create division. Instead, he challenged every leader in the company to transform one difficult day into a lasting improvement for thousands of future customers. Across the city, the police department completed its review using body camera footage, surveillance recordings, witness statements, and the complete archive provided by the bank. The investigation focused on professional conduct, decision-making, and departmental policy rather than public opinion. Chief Harold Reynolds addressed his officers privately before announcing the results. He reminded them that a badge represented public trust, and trust could never survive without fairness. Officer Daniel Brooks was found to have exercised poor judgment during the encounter and failed to follow established procedures requiring objective verification before escalating the situation. Internal disciplinary proceedings followed according to department policy. After additional administrative review, Brooks separated from the department, losing the retirement benefits he had expected to carry into the next chapter of his life. No celebration followed the announcement. Marcus did not hold a press conference. He did not release triumphant statements or seek public recognition. When reporters requested an interview, he accepted only one question. They asked whether he felt justice had been served. Marcus paused before answering with the same calm voice that had never abandoned him throughout the entire experience. "Justice is not about watching someone fall," he said. "Justice is about making sure fewer people experience the same mistake tomorrow." His words spread across television broadcasts, newspapers, and social media faster than the original videos ever had. Schools discussed them during leadership classes. Business organizations shared them during diversity seminars. Police academies requested permission to include portions of the security footage and ethics training because the recordings demonstrated something no textbook could fully teach. They showed how quickly assumptions could replace facts, and how powerful simple dignity could become under pressure. Months later, Marcus returned to the same branch without announcing his visit. The employees greeted every customer with patience, warmth, and equal respect. A young teller recognized neither expensive watches nor designer clothing when welcoming people to the counter. She simply smiled and asked, "How may I help you today?" Marcus quietly thanked her before completing his business. As he prepared to leave, he noticed the little girl who had once asked her grandmother whether he had done something wrong. This time she held the bank door open for an elderly stranger carrying several folders. The older man thanked her with a grateful smile, and she answered, "Everyone deserves kindness." Marcus stood still for a brief moment, realizing that no policy manual could have created a lesson more meaningful than that simple exchange. He stepped into the afternoon sunlight, looked back at the building he had spent decades creating, and smiled quietly. Wealth could build beautiful offices. Authority could open important doors. Titles could command attention. But none of those things could replace the quiet strength of treating another human being with dignity before knowing anything about them. Because in the end, character is revealed long before identity is, and the greatest measure of power is never how many people obey you, but how many people leave your presence feeling that their humanity was seen, respected, and never placed behind anyone else's assumptions.